Welcome. I'm Susan Rush. I'm Director of Content at SmartBrief, and I'm here with Deb Marotta, Retail and CPG Vice President of Hitachi Solutions America. We're here to continue the conversation about the life cycle of a package from the consumer's point of view, and why the supply chain should be approached as a customer-facing entity within retail organizations. Thanks for joining us, Deb. Let's start off by talking through the package life cycle. Can you walk us through each step of the life cycle from both the perspective of the customer and supply chain operations?
Sure, Susan. So let's start with somebody placing an order and assuming we're online here. So if someone places an order online, first thing they want to know is whether the inventory is there and where they can pick it up. So they really want to have ability to either pick it up or have it shipped to them. Secondly, once they've decided that, they've then decided they want information on the shipment. So when is it going to arrive and do they need it by a certain time frame? And then once the item has been shipped, the consumer really wants to understand when it's going to be delivered. And these days they like to have options because maybe they're not home, maybe they're not in a safe area, so they want to prevent theft, etc. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the consumer wants options throughout that process. Now, if we take that to the retailer or the brand, what that means is as you're going through this process, you need to provide them visibility. So you need to be able to show where your inventory is at all locations, whether it be a store, a DC, a brand, etc. So can you give them those choices? And if you give them the choices, how do you best optimize the profitability for you as an organization? So your systems need to have rules and criteria built in based on where the inventory is and what the cost is and how fast you can get it to them. So when it comes to shipping, you can work with your logistics partners, or again, is it something that they're going to pick up in store? So we've all been faced with the buy online, pick up in store these days. Some of the systems have been improved, but today, as we've been moving more through that, that process has been expedited with parking lanes, with updates of showing photos of license plates or employees to make that, of consumers. So it's very easy to deliver the item to the consumer at the right time. Now, when we come to delivery for the retailer or for the brand, it really comes down to what is that cost? How much control do you have over the logistics process? And what we're seeing more and more in certain segments is the last mile. So some of the delivery services are trying to look at opportunities to deliver within 30 minutes or even 15 minutes of when the order's been placed. That certainly presents an opportunity, or as we like to say, a challenge to those in terms of getting the order in and picking and processing it. But those are things that we can look at that are coming down the pipe that are really managing those customer expectations. So it's all about visibility. And the good news is today we have a lot of technology that helps us with that visibility. There's RFID tags, different types of tags. There's 5G coming and also edge computing, which all helps give that visibility. At the end of the day, 84% of the shoppers will change brand if the last mile delivery has failed. So we all know we need to be on our toes for that one.
Great. What are some of the pitfalls retailers and brands should look out for?
I think again, as that last point of customer sat and cost is key. So want to avoid the churn. And in order to do that, there's probably 3 areas of challenge. Can you really provide that end-to-end visibility in near real time? So are your systems connected? Are you working with your suppliers to get inventory in? What's the fastest way you can do that? How can you collaborate with those? Many times we may have visibility, but if it takes a long time to collaborate with your customers and suppliers, that can be a challenge and cause disruption. And then finally, the ability to orchestrate across the ecosystem. As we mentioned, that last mile, many retailers have created partnerships with some third-party delivery systems, and that means your customer sat at the end of the day is out of your control because they control the sat at the end by making that last mile. So I would say in terms of things for retailers and brands to look at is really evaluate the costs across the different channels. So what is your product cost compared to what is your cost to delivery compared to what fulfillment costs, and optimize those models. So for direct to consumer or distribution, they have lower delivery costs and lower fulfillment costs, but last mile, because they're further away, is higher. For the store employee labor cost is higher than that perhaps of a direct to consumer or a DC, but then the last mile is a lower cost. And another option is, can your vendor supply the product that has a higher delivery cost but lower fulfillment cost? So again, evaluate all of those and understand where the challenges may be or where you can optimize across your different product lines and across your customer segment.
And what are the most important things for retailers and brands to consider when it comes to maximizing their supply chains to meet the needs of today's consumers?
Well, we've all heard about the disruptions in the supply chain, whether it's been in the ports or whether it's been weather or whether it's been just raw materials. So that visibility, the end-to-end visibility is key. What we're seeing now is inflation. So what does that mean in terms of your costs and the value? So when we look at some of the delivery or warehouse, the labor costs are going up, fuel costs are skyrocketing. Where do all those costs come into play? And what we're seeing today is really the advancement of the digital supply chain control tower. And so that's technology that allows you to use AI and ML to simulate the different scenarios and to be able to best plan for that. And at the end of the day, that will give you that end-to-end visibility. You can look at data integration, and data is whether breaking down those silos or maybe some new sources of data. If you look at natural language processing and take in reviews from your customers on product features or your delivery process, those are all new sources of data that could be incorporated to help you refine your decision making or the criteria. And then we talk about collaboration. So having that visibility, but if it's hard to collaborate across your teams or across your supply chain, then you're not able to react quick enough. And then, as we mentioned at the last question, was orchestrating. You know, how much control was your span of control in that ecosystem, and are there ways that you can work with partners to streamline that or to have better visibility? I think in all of that, when you're looking at the digital control tower, there's also a build versus buy conversation that you can consider, as well as what technology will help give you that visibility. Is it IoT? Is it RFID? And what's coming with 5G? Or perhaps it's partnerships. Do you partner with a delivery service, or do you look at different 3PLs? And now we're even hearing about 4PLs that will take and manage that process even further for you. So there's a lot of options, but at the end of the day, you have to realize what's going to drive the most value for you. Is it a way to decrease your operational costs? Is it a way to increase your capacity? Can you lower your expedited costs? Can you improve your inventory optimization? There's all sorts of metrics. And in most cases, organizations will want to look at this over a roadmap. There's industry experts recommend looking at these in sprints, as we're all, from a technology perspective, agile in our movements, but perhaps look at roadmaps with 12 to 14 week sprints to be able to continue to drive value throughout your supply chain and your organization.
And why should retailers be reframing the way they think about supply chain as a customer-facing role in today's shopping environment?
I think earlier talked about the number of customers that will leave based on a failed delivery. We also have customers, 75% of shoppers will spend more with a brand if they've had a great delivery experience. So now supply chain ultimately ends up in how you touch the customer and sat throughout that process, but a lot of times it's about how am I managing that expectation. So if we really look at it from a customer sat and loyalty perspective, what do you want as a retailer or a brand? Maybe you want more to drive more traffic into your store, so you might incentivize buy online, pick up in store. Perhaps they're in the store, you want to drive more traffic on your web for repurchase or supplies type of thing. So what do you want and how do you reward your customer for that behavior? was interesting today. I think there's a lot of things that we need to think about as we come into this time of inflation and rising prices. And it's easy to look at changes in prices, but price sensitivity is there, and maybe it's not about changing the price. Maybe you have to have more adaptive models, and that's where the technology of AI comes in, so you can look at that more real time and understand nuances of the pricing changes. But maybe you can reimagine your product. So we've all seen prices go up, sizes go let down, but maybe there's a different way that you can look at product feature functionality. And that's where a great thing about natural language processing, if you're looking at reviews, they can provide you feedback of how you stack up against your competition from a feature functionality or from a service perspective. So maybe there's ways to look at reimagining your products, or perhaps thinking about partnerships, or maybe something that your vendor can take on in terms of, if they can't get you product, maybe they can support a promotion so that pricing or that cost will go down, or you don't have to do as many discounts. So I think there's a lot of things that we can look at to make sure we're maintaining that customer sat and keeping that customer loyalty as we're faced with the challenges that are coming about now post-pandemic.
And finally, how do you see returns impacting the package life cycle?
Well, depending on your segment of retail, some areas have higher returns. Right now, a stat says about 50% of the people under the age of 45 won't shop with a retailer if the returns experience has not been very convenient. So that's certainly something to keep in mind as we're talking about SAT and customer churn. But what that also means is 1 out of every 5 customer returns a process. So it returns a product. So it isn't something that happens out of the ordinary. It may happen more frequently. So you really want to focus on streamlining it and making it easy for the customer to do that. But it also has costs in terms of the organization, the retailer, or the brand. Right now, industry is showing about 3 to 5 times the cost of the original shipment for processing a return. So there's interesting things that are going on in the industry. There's been some dialogue about, do I not take a return? Maybe I just ship a replacement. Well, for smaller ticket items, maybe that's cheaper because the shipment costs outweigh the cost of the item. But then you have to think about, will there be a higher level of fraud or loss prevention? But can you also use AI to look at your return flows and where you're seeing them? Are they with a certain segment? Are they with a certain product or assortment or category? Maybe you can adjust those things. But you could also look at your 3PL relationship, because where the product gets a return may be convenient. Like, is it easier to buy online and return to the store? But if that product mix isn't in that store, do you have a one-off, and what does the store do with it? Or are there additional costs to ship it back to a DC? So there are a lot of things to think about when it comes to returns, but they are an important part of the overall supply chain life cycle.
Thank you, Deb. And to each of you watching, thank you for joining us. This concludes our talk with Hitachi's Deb Marotta.